Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and I am here today to talk about a few things that I am very passionate about, and that is the disruption curve. So this is something that that we use at Altimeter back when. Again, we've been using it since about 2010, 2011 or so. When we were dealing with the disruption from the previous crisis that we had with the financial crisis. And one of the things that we found was we wanted to use this model to help people understand, like, how do we think about disruption? Because it's not just this amorphous, chaotic thing. What I have found in my almost 20 years of being an analyst now is that disruptions follow this curve over time. And you go up that disruption curve, you figure out what's going on, then you go back to the other side of it. And we do this over and over and over again. So what I wanted to do today was to talk about what the disruption curve looks like. What I've seen it happen again and again, whether the disruption was the rise of the internet, the rise of search, digital, social, and now definitely everything that's going on with the COVID-19 crisis. So I just want to say hello to a few people who are joining the broadcast. So hello, Laura. Thank you so very much for joining. Kareem also. Please just introduce yourself, say hello so I know who's here, and also where you're coming in from. And if you would like to add also, what are the biggest disruptions that you're focusing on? And as I go through the curve, would love to hear how you're resonating with the curve. So hello, Susan. Well, very much glad that you can join us. Patak also. Again, what I'm going to be talking about today is the disruption curve. So let me just throw it up here so you can see what it looks like. So this is the disruption curve. This is something that we developed back at Altimeter back in the day. And I thought this is a really good time to bring it out again. And the disruption curve is this idea that over time, as the disruption comes along, we are climbing and climbing along that disruption curve, and we're feeling more and more pain and distress and anxiety. And what happens in the very beginning is we just are asking ourselves this one question: what the heck is going on? And then we're trying to understand what's going on. And then as we're climbing it, we're beginning to understand where things are. Now we're assessing, how are we doing? Like, where are we? How have things changed? And then we go into planning mode, into strategy mode. What are we going to do? And then finally, we go into support of that plan and then into execution. And what I really like about this model is that it can apply to any sort of disruption that you may be feeling. It could be an environmental disruption like what we're doing today, but it could also apply to a competitive disruption or a customer disruption. Whatever it is that's causing you and your organization this tremendous amount of pain, that's pushing you out of your status quo, that is creating disruption pain. And you're going to have to deal with it. So those stages of understand, assess, plan, support, and then execute are the key phases of disruption. So what I'd love for you to do is I'll keep the slide up here, is to just put into the chat, if you're listening to this live, and if you listen to the replay, I would love to hear where you feel like you are at this point. Have you figured things out? You're on the downward slope of that disruption curve. If you are, congratulations. I hope to join you there very, very soon. I'm still very much somewhere between, for myself, somewhere between the assess and the strategy. I have a pretty good plan in place. I have an idea what's happening, but I'm not quite there at that point of having everything in place and having all my execution plans in place. So what I find interesting is that once you have an idea of where you are, one of the things that you can do to figure out what you should be doing is this. Is that there are very specific things that you need to be thinking about at each point along that curve. And so if you're at that understand mode, then you want to be doing a lot of work around what's really going on with your customers. And this is the interesting thing. It's not about understanding the environment, what's happening with COVID-19. That's good to know. But what you really want to do is what's happening with your customers. How are they being impacted? How are their needs being changed? And then you want to go down and do some more scenario development. because that scenario development is extremely important, because this is the time when you're thinking, okay, this is what it looks like today. How could the future look? And it's not about figuring out exactly what the future looks like. It's about understanding what are the possibilities. I think it's so important to be developing scenarios right now, rather than doing what we normally do, which is to create a forecast and then try to create a plan to hit that forecast. There are so many things that we're uncertain about. So how could you possibly create just one plan, one path, when so many things are up in the air? So this is where that scenario development is so important, right at this very beginning stage of understanding, what does the world potentially look like? What are the options that we can develop? And then very quickly, then go back into an assessment mode, because the assess mode is really important, because once you have an idea what your customers are thinking about, and then also what the scenarios potentially are, you want to assess and do an audit, and also do an audit of how ready you are and able to execute on the potential strategies. Because you can't plan a strategy unless you know where you are, take an assessment, and also understand what are the assets, what is your overall readiness. So I do recommend, again, having some sort of audit or an assessment, understand just how capable, what are the skills that you have right now, what are the capabilities, how strong is your culture to be able to execute on various options that you may develop. And then when you think about the strategy and the planning you want to create, then you're starting to think about something a little bit different. And this is something where you're thinking, again, now going back to those scenarios, really doing robust scenario planning now. Now that you know what the potential scenarios look like, and you have an assessment of what you're capable of doing, then you can now say, well, these are my strategies, my robust, complete strategies for every single possible scenario. And that is so important, because you want to look at all of those strategies and then pick out your no regret moves. What are the things that, you know, regardless of what happens going forward, these are smart things to be able to be doing. And then thinking about your strategy plan itself, then thinking about really how do you create alignment around that strategy? Because it's one thing to have a plan, but if the rest of the organization doesn't know what's going on, you're never going to be able to move into the support and execution mode. And then the last part of it is really thinking about, that's the last two parts about support. And support and execute. Support is really aligning, now that you know what your no regrets moves are and what your potential strategies are going to be, what are the processes you need to have? What sort of organizational structure do you need to have? So laying down all of those foundations is extremely important. Thinking about the training you need to have, if you're going to have more digital skills, and also the technology you need to be able to engage with people potentially in these new digital channels. Just making sure you're getting all of those resources to be able to support that strategy. And then finally, the last part is, how do you actually scale? And how do you scale and execute in this last area? And the key resources here to be thinking about are, what do you need to bring in, and potentially partners? The partners you need to have to be able to execute against that strategy. Now that you have all these things here, we know that we rarely ever execute and exist in a vacuum. So looking around and saying, who are the adjacent industries, or even potentially some of your competitors that you could partner with to be able to take advantage of these new opportunities that are there? Now, I think a lot of these things that we're seeing here are again, it feels a lot to take on. And so what I encourage you to do is to do an assessment very quickly and understand, where are you along this disruption curve? And so I want to take a moment and just say hello to a couple people who I see have joined this chat. Kayo, good to see you again, coming in from Brazil. Chike, always so great to see you too as well. Julian, I'm glad you're enjoying this. And I would love to hear again, just where do you see yourself in these sections? And so I have a question here, which is a really good one. Are these 5 steps meant to be undertaken in a linear or iterative fashion? And that's a great question. And I will talk about that in just a second, because what I find with disruptive organizations, people who are doing this extremely well, they're doing it highly iteratively, and these curves are overlapping to each other. So let me just go and show that. Let me get over to my slide and I can show it to you. So this is an idea that I find to be really helpful. The idea is that usually you go through a curve like this. This is how most organizations see it. They see one curve and they climb up that curve, go over the top and over to the other side and go, phew, let off a huge sigh of relief that we're through it. But disruptive organizations do something very differently. They're going through and they're saying, oh, we're coming off the other end of it. Now where's the next disruption? How do we figure out where things are changing next? And they begin that curve again. And they go a little bit higher, and that cycle is a little bit faster. And they keep iterating on this again and again and again. And so what happens is that over time, these disruptive organizations aren't necessarily doing bigger disruptions. They are, but they're doing these disruptions and climbing disruption curves on a much faster fashion. They were able to understand, assess, plan, support, and execute in much faster cycles because they do this all the time. And because they get really good at this, because they are really good at anticipating where disruptions are coming from, being prepared to do this, they can go through the cycles faster. They can go higher in the disruption plane, and they also can begin the cycles and squeeze them a lot closer together. So I'll give an example. I was working with one organization, and they said, look, we really think it's time to go and do something really disruptive. But we're kind of tired. We're tired of all this change. We just have change fatigue. We did this huge disruption, and we just are still recovering from it. And I said, okay, totally get that. I totally get that you're going through these curves. I mean, how long ago was this? And they said it was 2 years ago. And I went, you're going to be in a world of hurt if it takes you more than 2 years to recover from a disruption. And so what I'm realizing is that these disruption curves that we're going through right now, the people who I'm talking to, I just talked to one organization, one of my clients, and they were talking about how, yes, they already have developed these scenarios. They developed the strategy against these scenarios. They have their reentry, reopening plans, and they're now thinking about working out those scenarios into Q1 and Q2 of next year and developing all of the alignment that they need to make sure everyone across the organization knows what they need to do to meet this new future needs, the new customer needs that they have identified. And I'm like, this is great. And then I turn around to talk to the next client, and they're like, well, we think we just need to buckle down, focus on the basics, make sure those are there, wait for things to settle down, and then we can figure out what to do next. So they're just trying to just keep things as normal as possible and not even go up that disruption curve, their ability to even look and see and understand where customers are or to develop scenario developments. They're just trying to avoid even going on the disruption curve. So my biggest point of advice here, and I find so many organizations doing this now, is we like kind of where we are today. We like this place where we've had the door slammed on us 2 months ago, 3 months ago now. And we kind of are at this new normal of just operating and slowly reopening. And we want to just go back to our old normal. And we know in our heart of hearts that we have to go and create a new normal. But we really want to just go back to the old normal and then kind of figure out what things are, go back to the status quo. And when we feel comfortable, then we can think about the future. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people are making. And that is that we are not acknowledging the fact that we have to go through this pain. We have to go through this cycle of understand, assess, plan, support, and then execute. And so I just want to throw up that curve again, because I do think it's so helpful to be able to understand just how difficult this is. Because I wish I could give you a silver bullet. I wish I could just make it really easy. Take my fairy godmother wand and tap it on your shoulder and just make it super easy. And the reality is, this is what you're going to have to go through, what we're all going to have to go through sooner or later. And my belief, my strong belief, is that you're better off doing this sooner and doing this as soon as you can. So I want to take a quick look at the questions that are coming in. And when some people are saying, let's see, I just saw one here from Ruben, who's saying, I'm shuttling between plan and understand. And especially as new information comes back, trying to figure out, like, how do I meet my goals and my objectives that were there prior to COVID-19? So the first point I would say is that going back and forth when you're going back, like kind of wiggling along on that curve, it's completely understandable because you're getting more and more information. But this is why I focus on those two things around understanding your customer needs and then developing those scenarios. Because ideally, the new information isn't going to make you deviate from your path. It's going to help you refine your path. And the sooner you can focus on a few options that you can then go and pursue for your plan, the sooner you can then decide what are my no regret moves and start executing on them. Time is of the essence here, because the sooner you can understand where those opportunities are with your customers, and especially your new customers that are coming along, the greater foothold you're going to have compared to the competition and the new entrants. I also have another question here. Let's see, from Ilham, what's the best way to change mindset and the best collaborative models you advise as CEOs? I find that the best way to change the mindset is to have what I call a big, hairy, audacious goal. You may have heard these BHAGs, or a powerful ambition. It comes from a strong sense of purpose and mission that's grounded on serving your customers. And it comes from that understanding stage again. If you don't understand who your customers are, how their needs have changed, how you are best positioned to meet those needs, then you're not going to have a very good story to tell yourself, let alone the outside market. And the more alignment you can create around what those customer needs are, the easier it will be to change that mindset. Because it may be difficult when you're climbing that disruption curve to convince people, we got to go up this curve. There's no way we can avoid it. It's easier to say, we're going to go up this curve because our customers require it. If we want to serve our customers, to serve this need, we are going to have to change the way that we look at the world, the way we execute, the way we plan, change everything. Or maybe you might be lucky. You don't have to change that much. Maybe your curve is not so high, but it will feel quite a bit of change still. So I think in the best way I've ever seen to change mindsets is to be really clear about what that objective is, create alignment around that objective, and then make sure everyone understands what it's going to take to be able to meet that need. You can have a lot of disagreements, you can have a lot of discomfort, but if everyone knows this is the reason why, that it's worth climbing that disruption curve, then you can create that alignment. The second part of the question from Ilham is, what are the best collaboration models? Man, I wish I knew. I wish I knew that there was one collaboration model that worked better than others. I have seen very strong command and control organizations go through this in flying colors, because that is the way that the leadership and the culture is aligned, where the top people make the decision and everyone just understands and follows. But they're doing a really good job of making sure they're communicating and making sure that there's great alignment from the top to what's going on. My company, Profit, just recently, literally today, just published a new report around culture and transformation. And one of the biggest takeaways is that we focus oftentimes on alignment at the very top level, but we forget about that middle manager level. And it was fascinating research that understanding and transforming the mindset of that middle layer, we sometimes call it the frozen middle, the tundra, the frozen tundra that just will not move. And what I've seen in disruptive organizations is that instead of making them gatekeepers, you make them facilitators, as people who facilitate information and decision making and speed it up through the organization. That's a very powerful collaborative model. That research also found that only 57% of organizations that were going through a transformation had a powerful ambition, had this audacious goal to unite people and align people, just a little bit over half. And again, I think that transformations are incredibly difficult. The self-imposed disruptions that you do to get to the other side. And if you're going to do this, then you need that powerful ambition, that audacious goal, that strong sense of purpose to be able to get you to the other side. All right, I just want to see, let's see if there are any other comments here. Want to say hello also to people like William, thank you for joining. Paul, thank you so much for coming to here as well. Lynn, love how you're thinking that you're moving into the plan and support area. Congratulations. And yeah, definitely they are overlapping, as you can imagine, going back and forth between these areas. And I also like some of the comments here that, like Chicky, you just said, you just threw out your financial projections. And somebody else was also saying, how do I hit my objectives from pre-COVID-19? And one of the biggest points of advice I have for people is if you had budgets and goals set before March 1st, I think trying to hit those things still is completely unreasonable. Now, those are objectives and goals that are centered on true customer needs, and that you believe those needs and those opportunities are so very much valid, then I could say, yeah, that plan could work, but center it based on what your customers are doing today. But I think fundamentally so many things have changed that you need a new plan and not wait until August and to try to do a plan for 2020. This is a time when you want to be looking at your next leadership meeting, not the next retreat, but the next time you get together and say, how are we going to tackle our plan? How are we revising everything? How are we questioning everything to be able to climb this disruption curve and get to the other side? I have another discussion coming up in next Wednesday and also the following Mondays, all around how do you actually put that strategy plan together? And in particular, what should your agenda be for your leadership team meeting, your next meeting? Because I think right now, having a checklist, having an idea of how to enter into the disruption curve is a really important thing because, frankly, all bets are off. All right, so I'm going to start closing up here. My key takeaway here today is this, in that if you think about this disruption curve, I'm just going to throw it up here again one last time. Where are you on this curve? And it's so important to know this because by knowing where you are in this curve, you can then prioritize the top actions that you should be thinking about. And here are the actions again that I encourage you to take. And depending on where you are, make sure you're working on the right thing, focusing on the job to be done. And one thing I would encourage you to do is to, again, I want to make sure that you have these slides. Let me just put up where you can find them. You can get all of this information at charlinglee.com/disruption curve. You can download these slides. You can also see this broadcast and other broadcasts at that URL, charlinglee.com/events. And the other thing I would say is that if you consider yourself a disruptor and you would like to get more support, please come and join us in this community called Quantum Networks. I see quite a few of the members who are part of that disruption network. So people like Lynn and Chike are here. I'm sorry if I didn't recognize others, but come and join us and have these conversations where we talk about things like this. So I'll be on there for the next couple of hours and through for the next 24 hours or so, just having a discussion around how do you climb that disruption curve? Where are you? What are some best practices? And we'll be talking about that more inside of that community. So please, good luck to all of you. I wish you the best in climbing that disruption curve. Do not avoid it because it is coming for you. There's no way to hide from that. All right. Thank you so much again for watching this broadcast, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.